Hello, everyone. Let's give it a few moments to have some of our presenters have a chance to join us. But maybe in the interim, I will just happy to welcome you all to day three of our pre-conference talks, and we're really happy to have you join us today as we gear up for our in-person meeting next week. My name is Piers Weigers, and I am the Training and Capacity Building Coordinator for the JobRight Network. I'm a first-generation immigrant and acknowledge my role as a guest on these lands. As a national network, we work across many traditional Indigenous territories with our head office on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka peoples. I offer this acknowledgement with humility and a commitment to continued learning. In today's session, you'll hear about work focused on accessibility and equity in childhood disability research, including efforts to improve participant diversity and better understand the intersection of race and disability in pediatric rehabilitation. You'll also hear about co-design and accessibility in early childhood and digital literacy, initiatives that center lived experience in neurodevelopmental conditions, and approaches to building stronger cultures of partnership. The final set of talks will highlight integrated knowledge translation and how lived expertise is being embedded into implementation science to strengthen real-world impact. Throughout the day, we've also built in a number of Q&A segments. So as you're listening, feel free to jot down any questions, reflections, or connections to your own work, and we'd love to hear more about them. Now, before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items to take note of. It was asked that unless you are asking a question or presenting, please do mute yourself. For those that aren't presenting, please do turn off your camera to help limit any sort of bandwidth limitations we may have. And so for those designated Q&A segments, multiple ways that you can interact. Feel free to jot your question directly into the chat box, and we will happily relay your question to the particular presenter. Or alternatively, just raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute yourself and just ask your question directly to the presenter. So we certainly encourage that, and we've had some really great discussions over the last 2 days, and hope to keep that going today. So thanks again for being here and for helping us kick off what we hope will be a great start to our conference. So with that said, let's get started with our first group. So one moment. And so with that, so Catherine, I will hand the virtual podium over to you, and you can take it away.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, it's coming through perfectly.
Yeah. So hi everyone. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Catherine. I'm a former postdoctoral fellow with the JobRight Network. And today I'll be presenting the accessibility considerations, enhancing research impact through inclusivity project together with Jillian. So we're also working with Céline Dano on this project, who couldn't be with us today, but is very much part of this work. So I'll maybe just let Jillian introduce herself, and then I'll dive into the presentation of the project.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Jillian, and I'm excited to go through our project with you. I think it's some cool work we've been doing.
So just to give you a bit of background on where this project comes from. So as a former trainee in the network, I had to learn how to conduct patient-oriented research, which, as you know, is very different from traditional research. And honestly, some parts of patient-oriented research felt very organic. So for example, working collaboratively, building relationships, and engaging partners with lived and living experience. But one aspect that I personally found a bit more challenging was all the accessibility considerations. So specifically, when we engage partners with lived and living experience, how do we ensure that they can really participate both as research partners and or research participants? And how do we disseminate our findings in ways that are actually understandable, usable, and reachable for everyone? So I applied for and received the Training Innovation Fund offered by the Child Right Network to work on this project. And the overall goal of the project is to build capacity by providing practical guidance on how to conduct research and knowledge mobilization activities that are accessible and inclusive to the people who are meant to benefit from them. And also helping embed accessibility as a core principle of child health and patient-oriented research. So what we did, the first step was to conduct a literature review. So we started back in March last year, and we really focused on identifying and summarizing the best practices related to accessibility in both research and knowledge mobilization. So the idea here was really to ground the project in what already exists, rather than reinventing the wheel. And this work really helped us clarify what accessibility can look like across the different stages of research. So from design to engagement to dissemination. And then building on that, the next step was to start developing a practical and user-friendly guide. And again, the goal here was to have a toolkit with clear, actionable steps that research teams could use when designing accessible and inclusive research activities. So this phase really focuses on translating principles into practice. And we're still working on that piece here. And currently, while still finalizing the guide, we're expanding the toolkit by developing short videos and interactive activities. So these are really designed to support the research teams in applying the accessibility principles in their own work, so not just reading about them. So I'll pass it over to Jillian for the rest of the presentation.
All right, so as Catherine mentioned, we have a guide in progress. You can see a couple of screenshots here, but that's not the full document. We have a couple different elements. So one of the things we really wanted to include was a quick reference summary. So that's just a very quick, if you wanted to glance or quickly get refreshed on the certain elements that you should include when doing your research or think about, that's there for you. We'll talk about another format in a second. But we also have it organized hopefully in a way that's sequential, but also that you can quickly refer to the section that you need if you don't want to read through the whole thing cover to cover. It's there to be usable, so we really wanted to prioritize it in a way that you could use it in different ways. Another thing not pictured here was we included links or hyperlinks to the document, so you can click to the reference section if you want to see, or resources, sorry, if you wanted to see what resource we use for a specific section, and so forth. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, we created another format of that quick start guide. We really wanted to have it in two formats, one being more accessible for screen readers and the other being more visually enhanced with different pictures and just visual cues to make it a bit more engaging and something that you can also quickly refer to. The third thing was the interactive activities. So we wanted all of these principles that we're teaching to be actionable and tangible. So we're still creating activities to help you kind of put what you've learned into practice and therefore embed them in your practices. So this is our dissemination tool, which is a microsite that will house every thing I just mentioned. So from the guide itself to the activities to the infographic, it'll all be right there. So easy to access and just everything together for you. So like I said, one of the most important things to us was to have something practical and tangible that you can really apply into your research and embed accessibility into your research practices. We don't see this as a one-time thing where we're just creating this guide and forgetting about it. We really want it to be part of a bigger and broader change in the research community to have this be a standard practice.
Yeah, so just to conclude, we really hope that this toolkit will be used and most importantly, that it will be useful. So like Jillian said, with this project, our goal is really to help teams embed accessibility principles across all the stages of research and knowledge mobilization so that accessibility really becomes a foundation of patient-oriented research rather than an afterthought, which was kind of the case for me at some point in my research project. And ultimately, the way we see it, this is one step toward supporting more inclusive partnerships, strengthening research impact, and advancing our shared mission of equitable and meaningful child health research. So we'll be happy to take questions during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Jillian. All right, so next up, let me hand over the podium to Chantal.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
You're coming through great.
Perfect. Okay. Pierre, should I share my slides or?
Please do, if that's more convenient for you. Sorry, is it working on your end?
I think so. I might need a second, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get this in presenter mode. Can you see that?
No, we're just seeing your video feed.
No, okay. I'm really terrible with tech. Let's try one more time. Any luck now?
No, so I'm just wondering, did you drop off your file in the oh, there we go.
I did. Can you see it now?
Perfect. Yes, now it's coming up. Wonderful.
Great.
All right, fantastic. Take it away.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Chantal Mangru. I am the Program Manager of Research and Innovation at Grandview Children's Center, more commonly known as Grandview Kids. Today I'll be presenting on behalf of our study team and our co-investigators, Dr. Taryn Eckmeyer of Grandview Kids and Dr. Megan Lloyd of Ontario Tech University. So our presentation really will share some of the early findings from a co-designed survey that we developed with our families who have lived experience in the intersection of race and disability. Now, our goal was to not just describe who is accessing pediatric rehab services, but to also understand how families experience inclusion, access, and quality of care, and how these experiences differ when race and disability intersect. Before I begin, I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. We're the guests on the ancestral lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, home of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Mississaugas people. As we're guests on this lands, we recognize the role that we play in seeking truth and upholding reconciliation. Grandview Kids strives for a future where all children and youth can reach their highest levels of ability, participation, and fulfillment in life. We also focus here on empowering children and youth through specialized assessments, treatments, and supports that enhance participation across all areas of life, including everyday activities, education, and social engagement. Now, our study was motivated by a growing body of research that shows how access to healthcare is not experienced equally across all groups. Specifically in Canada, racialized communities continue to face systemic barriers to care, including things like discrimination and reduced access to services. So existing research has suggested that when race and disability intersect, that these barriers are often exacerbated. So in response to all of this evidence, we sought to better understand the experiences, specifically here at our Grandview Kids community. Now, our goal really was to identify the barriers and gaps in care and use these insights to support our team in delivering more culturally safe care and equitable and responsive services. Now, our study was being conducted in 2 phases. We're currently in our phase 1 of this project, and this focuses on the understanding of who is accessing and waiting to access Grandview Kids programs and services. Specifically, our first objective was to describe the population demographics of our clients that are receiving care and on our wait list, as well as to examine our families' perceptions of care, including their sense of inclusivity and belonging, access to quality of services, wait times, cost, location, and a range of the services that we provide. Now, this data will help to identify potential gaps and inequities across the services that they're experiencing. In phase 2, which we haven't begun yet, we hope to build on phase 1 findings by centering the lived experience through focus groups of racialized families, raising children and youth with disabilities, with a focus on experience of bias, barriers, and inequities when accessing Grandview services. As I previously mentioned, our study team disseminated a survey that was co-designed with our family advocates. At Grandview Kids, our family advocates are caregivers of racialized children with communication, developmental, and physical needs, which helps to ensure that the questions really are reflective of the lived experience rather than institutional assumptions. Now, we did disseminate this survey to over 10,000 families, both electronically and in person. In terms of some preliminary findings, so far we've had 484 participants take part in our study. Now, in terms of the demographics, 97% identified as parents. With respect to gender, 84% of our participants identified as female and 15% identified as male. We were really encouraged to see that these interim results reflect the diversity of the Durham region community. While 49% of our participants identified as white, we also have strong representation from South Asian, Southeast Asian, East Asian, Middle Eastern communities. In addition, 9% of our participants shared that they identify with multiple racial identities. So overall, these findings suggest that we are reaching a broad and diverse cross-section of our community. When we learn a little bit more about our population demographics, the parents recruited specifically, 6% identified as being part of the LGBTQA+ community, 17% identified it as having a disability, and 33% identified that they were not born in Canada. Oops, sorry. So parents had reached out to Grandview Kids because they were most concerned with how their child learn, talk, self-regulate, and focus their attention, and express their emotions. Most participants were seeking support from occupational therapy, speech language pathology, and autism services. And the greatest proportion of our participants were waiting for site consults and our extensive needs program. The greatest proportion of our participants actively accessing our programs were in medicine and physiotherapy. And we asked 4 questions regarding inclusivity, and 68% agreed that at Grandview Kids, they felt like they belonged. And among the participants who disagreed, 16% of Black respondents felt that they did not belong, as did 15% of parents with a disability, and 11% of participants who were not born in Canada. 76% agreed that at Grandview Kids, programs and services were delivered in a way that is respectful of their family's culture. And 58% agreed that they had access to programs and services that supported their child's needs. 28% of Black respondents, 25% of South Asian respondents, and 26% of parents with a disability disagreed. Lastly, 67% agreed that they had access to the information that they needed to help support their child. So some key takeaway messaging for us: this work really engaged a genuinely hard to reach population. Racialized communities in North America have well-founded reasons to be cautious about institutional requests for personal information rooted in colonial histories of surveillance, harm, and misuse of data. We've learned that at Grandview Kids, we serve a diverse population of families, and their experiences of accessing services are not created equally. When we think about where this work is taking us, we really see it as a journey towards a more equitable system, and one that's built with families, not just for them. Families are alongside us in shaping how we do this work, and their lived experience in guiding or guides us really every step of the way. Together, we're looking closely at how our services are designed, how we're supporting and coaching our caregivers, and how people access clear, timely information. We're also using what we're learning to advocate for meaningful government policy changes, particularly when it comes to sustainable funding that allows this work to continue and grow. Most importantly, this is about an ongoing commitment. We are dedicated to continually learning, refining, and improving our services so that every child and youth has the opportunity to thrive and live at their full potential. Lastly, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge SSHRC, so our Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, for funding this research. I'd also like to recognize our co-investigators from Ontario Tech University, Dr. Megan Lloyd, Dr. Les Jacobs, and Dr. Rob Ballo, as well as our student team, Alyssa, Hannah, Faith, and Kaylin. Last but not least, I wanted to thank Yvonne from the Durham region for her contributions. Thanks again to the Child Bright community for giving me the opportunity to speak about our idea study today. If you want to connect with us, you can feel free to reach out at research@grandviewkids.ca. I'd be happy to take any questions there, or of course during the Q&A.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for presenting, Chantal. All right, next up, we have Lola.
Are y'all able to see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Lola, and I am a third-year Honors Health Sciences student at McMaster University. I'm also currently an EDIDI intern, so part of the EDIDI program with Child Bright. And today I'll be presenting a project that was conducted a while back about assessing participant diversity within the Child Bright network. And so the goal of this project was essentially to understand representation across the Child Bright network's research. So to begin, it's really important to establish the importance of diversity in pediatric research. And so pediatric research projects require diverse participants to ensure that the findings are beneficial for the general patient population. So traditionally, ethnic minorities, rural communities, as well as low-income households have been underrepresented in pediatric research. And so this calls for a more updated assessment of participant demographics, especially across research studies and especially across a network as large as ChildBright. And now for some background about the ChildBright Network and the projects being conducted within the network. So from 2016 to 2022, there were 13 phase 1 research projects that were conducted within the ChildBright Network. And these studies recruited participants from all across Canada. And so after participant recruitment was complete, in the summer of 2024, we analyzed the diversity of ChildBright's participant population, and we assessed whether the research was inclusive. So now a little bit about the goal of the study, as well as how we were able to carry the study out. So to begin, the objective of the study was to analyze the participant demographic data from the ChildBright project's 13 phase 1 projects and assess the diversity of the study participants. So we did this in 3 steps. The first step was collecting demographic data from ChildBright's 13 phase 1 research projects. So this demographic data was collected in aggregate. So we did not get the patient data at an individual level, but rather from each of the 13 projects, the data was summarized in a table and presented to us to include in the study. Next, we compared the data that we got from Statistics Canada. So after pooling the aggregate data we got from each of the studies, we compared the ChildBright data to data from Statistics Canada to see how they would compare. And these sources are available upon request. And finally, we engaged partners with lived and living experience throughout our study. So we had 4 partners with lived and living experience that were engaged throughout the project and helped us to conduct the study. And just a little bit more about our PWLE engagement. So they were involved from study startup to study closeout. So they helped us define research priorities, set project goals, and develop research questions. And in terms of the study conduct, they helped us review primary data, and they used their lived experiences to inform data interpretations. And so they gave their thoughts about the data and what this could mean based on their interpretations. And finally, they also helped us co-author knowledge mobilization tools, such as abstracts and posters that were presented at different conferences. And they also helped us co-develop a webinar presentation, as well as co-producing data visualizations and infographics. So now for the exciting part, which is the results. So in total, we had about 16,500 participants. And of this number, there were 8,951 parents and caregivers and 7,549 children youth. Now, an important thing to note is because this data was presented to us in aggregate, it did not necessarily count for individuals who might have been part of multiple research studies within the network. So let's say we had one participant that was part of study A, and they were also part of study B within the ChildBright network. There was no way for us to know because we didn't get the data at a patient level. We got it in aggregate from all of the teams. However, this number is reflective of the total number of participants that we got in aggregate across all the studies. And so the demographic categories analyzed were age, sex, gender, education, income, location, ethnicity, and child diagnosis. And another important thing to note is that not all of the teams reported demographic data for every category. So some teams might have just only reported on education, income, and location, while others might have only reported on age, sex, and ethnicity. And all 13 studies have been analyzed to date. So this information is reflective of the information that we got from the 13 studies within the ChildBright network. So looking at the first demographic category, which is sex and gender, so we found that majority of the parents and caregivers were female, while majority of the children and youth were male. And the gender results followed a very similar trend as this. So majority of the parents and caregivers were female, while majority of the children and youth were male. And there were 0.049% of participants that identified as transgender individuals, and 0.087% of participants identified as neither male, female, or transgender. So something that our PWLEs had to say about this was the fact that mothers tend to play a bigger role in childcare, and so they're more likely to participate in studies such as these. And so this could account for the difference in sex results that we see among the parents and caregivers. So next, in terms of location, we found that 90.1% of child right participants were from urban areas compared to 82.2% of the Canadian population in 2021 from StatCan. So this information is reflective of the 2021 census data from Statistics Canada. And so something our PWLEs had to say about this was the fact that we had to increase our research in rural areas. And those in rural areas are not accessing research. And again, this is quite reflective of a larger issue within Canada, which is that a lot of individuals from rural areas are not able to access or participate in research. So now in terms of educational data that we received from the studies, so we found that majority of participants attained at least a high school diploma. So 99.1 participants who were a part of these research studies had a high school diploma or higher. And this is compared to 82% of the Canadian population in 2021, according to StatCan. And something our PWLEs had to say about this was they pointed out the fact that parents with less than a high school diploma often take up shift work, so their schedule is unpredictable and they may not be able to commit to a study. So this is one potential explanation for why individuals from this group might be highly overrepresented in the population data. And so now for a little bit of the distribution of household income across participant families. So this is the data that we got. And we found that this reflects the gross household income before taxes as reported by participants. And so again, just for reference, the median household income of Canadian families in 2021 was $84,000. So it would be somewhere around here. And so you can see quite a few individuals are represented on the higher side of the income scale. And there was actually quite a large number of participants who preferred not to respond. Again, this might have to do with just the general culture. Some individuals might not feel comfortable sharing their data about their income, whereas others might be concerned that data about their income might negatively affect them in terms of their ability to participate in studies, and so they might be a bit more hesitant to report. And so now in terms of the ethnicity data, so this reflects the self-reported ethnicity of the participants. And an important thing to note about these numbers is that for many of the studies, participants had the option to select all that applies. So let's say somebody is a mixed race individual, so they have both European ancestry as well as Black ancestry. Some studies did not have an option for mixed race. They asked individuals to select all that applied. And so you would see within this number, the data results might be a little bit skewed just because of the fact that some studies did this while others did not. And again, just to compare, in 2021, about 70% of Canadians identified as Caucasian, according to Statistics Canada. And so you can see the data within the Child Right Network is quite comparable to the data from Statistics Canada. So something a PWLE pointed out about this was that sometimes research studies don't give enough clarity on which choice to select. So for example, does somebody from India select Southeast Asian? And so again, this calls for research demographic data forms to be of utmost clarity so participants know exactly which categories would apply to them. And finally, information about child diagnosis. So we found really diverse representation of child diagnoses across all the studies. And so there are a variety of conditions from neurological conditions to physical conditions and diagnoses. So just in conclusion, and also looking to some future direction. So our findings highlight the need to recruit more participants from rural settings, recruit more male parents and caregivers, and also to recruit more participants with low socioeconomic status. And our PWLEs noticed a need to standardize participant demographic data collection across teams to facilitate easy analysis and interpretation. They also observed that unclear or inconsistent selection options make it harder for participants to know which responses to choose. So looking forward to some ways that this could be applied, this information could inform the creation of future demographic data forms to ensure that the collection methods across the network are standardized and that it's very clear to participants how they should essentially fill out the form. And also this could help with targeted recruitment from areas where we are seeing less representation. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. This is my email if you have any further questions or would like to reach out, and here's some acknowledgements to other individuals part of this presentation, as well as our PWLEs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lola, for outlining all of that for us. Looking forward to some questions coming to you at the Q&A. All right. So the last set of presenters in this first cohort are Logan, Sam, and Michelle. So happy to hand the podium over to you all, and you can take it away.
You see my slides? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm the first of our three presenters. Today, we're talking about advancing equity in childhood disability research partnerships with often excluded children, youth, siblings, and caregivers. It's a grounded theory study. Thanks, Sam, here for forwarding us. I'm Michelle Phoenix. I'm the PI on this study and an associate professor in the School of Rehabilitation Science at McMaster University and a CanChild scientist. And my program of research focuses on how we can improve access and equity in children's rehabilitation services and research. Sam?
I am Sam Machinsky. I use she, her pronouns. I am the training director for the Family Engagement and Research Program. During my training at CanChild and McMaster, I completed a postdoc fellowship with Michelle. Logan?
Hi, my name is Logan, and many of you know me from the Childbright Network, and I'm the youth partner on this project. So, we wanted to bring you in and let you know about how we define often excluded groups, and so. In childhood disability research, often excluded groups as we define it include disabled children themselves, fathers of disabled children, youth, and individuals who are racialized, are first language learners or immigrant members, members of the indigenous community, and those who identify as queer or trans, and those who are low income or have low literacy levels or mental health challenges and or reside in rural or remote communities.
Thanks, Logan. So we used a qualitative constructivist grounded theory approach to explore the question that Michelle mentioned earlier around how do often excluded disabled children, youth, and families and researchers engage in childhood disability research partnerships. So we conducted semi-structured interviews with disabled children, youth families, and childhood disability researchers asking questions like, have you ever experienced tokenism in childhood disability research? What motivated you to engage people from often excluded populations, the populations that Logan just mentioned? And participants also completed a demographic survey. Our goal was to identify the core components of engagement with often excluded populations, examine how these components relate to one another, and understand how they contribute to both positive and negative research engagement experiences. Ultimately, our aim is to generate a theory that explains the processes of engaging disabled children, youth, and families in research partnerships. Data analysis was led by our research assistant, Allie, who conducted inductive coding, and she's facilitated team discussions. Each meeting was concluded with 5 to 10 minutes of reflective practice, during which we engaged in memo writing to document emerging insights and really understand how our team is working together. So we've completed data collection on 4 disabled children who had participated in research, 7 disabled youth from often excluded groups who have partnered in research, 12 siblings, parents, and caregivers from often excluded groups who had partnered on research, and 13 childhood disability researchers for a total of 36 participants. Off to you, Michelle.
So our emergent theory has 4 points, 4 key points that are sequentially related to each other. So first we looked at who is or who is not being engaged. Then looking at their motivations for engagement, we looked at how people are engaging, so some of the principles and practices of both positive and negative experiences with engagement, and then what are the outcomes of that engagement. And I'll tell you a little bit about each of those 4 areas. So very similar to Lola's presentation, we found that fathers are often not engaged, and the quote from a parent reflects that says a lot of research that claims to represent parents is really just representing mothers, and that's a problem. We found that families who speak languages other than English typically aren't tapped or reached out for to invite their partnership or engagement, as well as caregivers who have not previously engaged. So you might have heard, and the quote reflects that there's a tendency for researchers to invite people who have previously partnered in the past or who are well connected to research projects, which means we might not be inviting people who are newer to these spaces, including our rural communities. So this parent said, I do see that some researchers continue to use the same patient partners over and over again, and I think that's because it's easy. So the motivations for engagement, sometimes called the origin story, for caregivers especially, were a deep desire to make a difference. And same with our research participants, our researchers who participated in this study. So we included researchers who had partnered with people from often excluded group, and sometimes their reasons for doing so were rooted in their own lived experience that might have to do with social exclusion. So this parent said, I had such a negative experience with navigating services. And then I was like, what can I do to make a difference? So it very often wasn't for their own child. It was for the people coming through the system behind them that people wanted to make a difference for. Children and youth were a little bit different. They liked partnering or participating in research because for youth, it said, probably the most fun part is that you get to try for most research in general, you get to meet or try new things and meet new people. So they had this own personal sense of fulfillment through their skills developed and their networks developed. And children often said, well, my parent told me or asked me to do it, so I did it. But both those groups, the youth and the children, really talked about the importance of compensation and how that was a motivator for them. So how are people engaging? You heard a lot about this at yesterday's Child Right conference. The importance of fostering trusting relationships through respect, compassion, taking time to develop those relationships, humanism, and connection. In terms of creating psychological safety, that really refers to the openness of the team to receive often critical feedback from their partners, recognizing power differentials and past histories of trauma, stigma, and how power and bias may be shaping our interactions and relationships. There was a reminder to be thoughtful and flexible in the means and timing of communication, to consider the jargon, especially acronyms that we use, and language translation, and taking time to listen. And finally, to apply meaningful and inclusive practices by tailoring the approach for children, being creative, and providing compensation for teams to embed reflection and depth to avoid tokenism throughout their research partnerships. So I've just captured a couple of our outcomes using key quotes, but we did ask about positive outcomes of engaging in research, but also what were some of the negative felt outcomes, knowing that there can be harm throughout these research engagements. A lot of people talked about unknown outcomes of the research. So they might have contributed because they wanted to make a difference, but did they make a difference? They sometimes weren't sure what the outcomes of the research were, and those personal outcomes as well. So the first, I can read our quotes out loud, Sam. The first parent said, so I don't know, to be honest, what's going to be done with that information. I'm hoping, some of the information they gathered will be applied to improve resources, but I don't know for sure. And the next parent felt they made a difference in policies. So she said, but they're all very, very important. They're going to make a difference in policy. And a sibling said, but really we finally get to have a little piece of a voice in this. That was really quite important. One of our next steps is to build, we have now launched a training, a micro-credential and equity-based co-creation. And if you're interested in learning that, you're able to take the course through McMaster University. You don't have to be a researcher or a trainee. And the web address for that is on the left-hand side. And I'll let Logan tell you about our other new next steps.
Sure. So the I'm the lead for the Child Bright modules, which is kindly funded by the Training and Innovation Fund, and we are currently in the stages of recording our voices for the modules, so that it is told from the voices that are going to be impacted by this, and also by our team members, including our child partner, who you will hear from in the next slide.
Sam, we don't have audio.
Can I just reshare with
Yeah.
You can click the two buttons on the right-hand
Yeah,
side.
that should work, yeah.
Hi, my name is Zoha. I'm an elementary school and a child partner with lived and living experience. I joined this project to make a difference. I believe children and youth with disabilities should be included in health research projects because our voices matter. We have knowledge and ideas others don't because we know what it feels like to have a disability and to live with these experiences firsthand. This can help improve your research projects. And Article 13 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child supports our right to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Logan, Sam, and Michelle. All right, now for the fun part. We're going to open up the Q&A segment. So if you're able to join us for the previous days, they were a bit shorter. So we're lucky that the next few are a bit extended. So hopefully we can unpack some of the thoughts a bit more. So with that in mind, we'll open up the chat. Feel free to add any thoughts or questions or comments there. But alternatively, you can also just raise your hand and we will call on you to interact with any of the presenters from the previous set. So maybe I'll give a few moments for you all to get your thoughts together. But I did jot down a few that hopefully will get the discussion flowing. And I guess maybe my first question, and maybe I'll direct one to Lola. So you identify that within the network, there are a number of groups that aren't really well represented, and are that we should do better in reaching out to those groups. So I'm just wondering, how does what my notes say? How can we use standardized demographic data, or demographic data collection to I guess improve our inclusive recruitment strategies, but to ultimately improve representation and strengthen patient-oriented research projects?
So yeah, I think the first step is using the information that we got from the analyzing participant data to help with a targeted outreach to these communities. And so involving PWLEs and things like participant recruitment, helping them give us advice on some areas and methods that we can use to reach out to these communities, I think is the first step. And a very important step, so that that could increase the recruitment of participants onto the study. And then I think in terms of the standardized demographic data, that can really help in ensuring that across the network and across all the different studies, we are accurately and consistently reporting on different demographic uh, components. So for example, in some of the projects reported on only a few demographic categories, while others reported on more than others. And so just really having a standardized way to report on demographics can help for future iterations of this, when we hope to go back and look at who's represented and who isn't, just so we can get a more accurate view of who and where we need to target.
Thank you, Lola. Yeah, no, I think that that definitely sets the stage for it. So I'm not seeing any hands or questions quite yet, but you're free to interject at any time. And I guess my next question, I guess, kind of building on that, is for you, Chantal. And I'm just wondering, in your phase work, it's like, what sort of insights from your phase 1 survey would you say highlights opportunities or gaps for creating those culturally safer and more equitable care for racialized families?
I'm so sorry. I didn't hear
Oh.
that.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Let me so I guess, yeah, my question is what insights from your phase 1 survey that you sort of had a chance to analyze to date highlight opportunities or gaps for creating culturally safer and more equitable care for racialized families?
That's a great question. I think, again, we are very early on in some of the preliminary data, but sort of going off of the question that you asked, Lola, as well, I think that by increasing the access, and when we reached out to our families, we realized that English is not a first language for a lot of families. So making sure that all of our materials were available in multiple languages is a really great first step. And once we move into the phase 2 of the project, where we're looking at focus groups, ensuring that we have people that can, translate. I think that would be really important for our research going forward. I think that the Durham region specifically is a very diverse, a diverse population, and English is not the first language for many. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we will focus on in our research.
And thank you so much. So, Symbia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Congratulations on the work that has been done so far. One of the questions that I have as an Indigenous person is always, what kind of relationship building or what have you used when you're looking at recruitment or documenting lived experiences around Indigenous families? What kind of methods have you used for engagement? And if you've had any, what has been, successful around that engagement and trust building?
Was that a question for the group or was that for me? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, for the last group or for the last person that was just speaking. Yes, Chantal, sorry. I should have said the name.
No, that's okay. So I'll be completely transparent with you. I'm a very new member to the Grandview Kids community. I just recently joined the Idea Study team. I am myself looking at additional recruitment strategies that we can implement into phase 2. So that's something that we're certainly going to look at, but I don't have anything that I can think of off the top of my head. If there's any suggestions from the group, I would love to hear any recommendations. But that's sort of where I am sitting right now. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer for you though.
Any follow-ups, Symbia? All right, so time for one more quick question. So from the chat, and this is a question from Corinne to Michelle, Sam, and Logan. So the definition of often excluded groups or equity deserving groups struck a chord with what the ChildRight Network has seen. How did you come across the definition included in your slide?
I can take a first try at this, and Sam and Logan, feel free to chime in. We had a lot of team discussion about how to frame this concept of often excluded populations, who are also sometimes referred to as equity deserving populations. And I hope it's going away, but previously hard to reach populations. So there's no either clear term or clear definition. So we used intersectionality theory to think about who tends to have more experience of privilege or marginalization across a number of different personal, but also population variables closely tied to social determinants of health. And that's why that wheel was in our slides, and we've put a link in the chat for someone else who wanted to access it. We also use literature specific to childhood disability, where we've seen in multiple studies and reports, including today, that fathers tend to be less included, even though they wouldn't be indicated by the wheel of power of privilege. So specific to childhood disability, we think about parents or caregivers who might have mental health challenges, and we know that that's often in the literature been related to children with disabilities and access to care and research, as well as fathers in rural populations, as we saw today.
All right, back to you real quick, Cynthia.
Yeah, just to go off of what Michelle was just sharing, can I share one little thought to it? When we use that language, it's now helpful to reflect the systems that are actually trying to interact with these people. Because before, if we're talking about marginalized people, or if we're talking about people of color, it others people, and it doesn't always talk about the mechanism of exclusion, right? So when you're talking about often excluded people or historically excluded voices, you're talking to the system that's excluding those people. So that's not been a part of the language when we're talking about academia in the past. And when we're talking from a very colonial framework, and we're talking from a Western focused framework within education, higher education, universities, that has been the language, because we live in a hierarchical society, and within those systems, and it often others people, and it also often does not name that they've been excluded. And it also excuses the system from any responsibility to actually engage and meaningfully engage, and to do the anti-racism work, all the work in behind to be trusting, safe people to engage with those families. Yeah.
And as always, Cynthia, thank you for the insightful comments. So if anyone has any more questions, feel free to add them in the chat, or you can email them to us, and we'll be happy to relay them to any of our presenters so far. But with that said, to keep us on track, we need to move on to our next set. I'll hand it over to Corinne, who will walk us through with the next set of presenters.
Thanks, Pierre. So up next we have Kathy. Kathleen, morning.
Hi, can everyone see and hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Wonderful. I can get started then?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Bites, and my colleague Michaela Knott unfortunately couldn't be here today, but we're really excited to present. So today I'm discussing the concept of involving families and having family-centered research. I was a part of a wonderful project that started in 2023, and the idea of the project was to introduce the series comprehension and skill set of voiceover into early childhood. So the use of gestured-based screen readers for children in early childhood, to allow them to be equitable in the classroom when they began school-age experiences for digital literacy. So we called the project Early Years Digital Literacy Project, and that didn't even begin to get into what the project was. So this project brought on over 100 families with children with sight loss. And the idea is for the children to have access to an app at home on an iPad and learn gestured-based skills to be able to use VoiceOver Screen Reader. The project was set up and organized that the children would play asynchronously with the families, and our team would support the families within any type of digital literacy competencies and skill set that they might need. The project had a set of activities and milestones which seemed to be set out quite clearly. The app was developed with a United States USA-based company, Objective Ed, and we had support from Diane Brewer, which was a voiceover skills teacher. So the app was set up to teach voiceover skills. When we designed an inclusive research project, this was supposed to be set for English as well as French when the app was to be played. Our team, Monica Brocher, as well as Christina Clark, myself, and Michaela, had supported the app developer to create a low vision and blind inclusive app for the children to learn. And the app was to have a set of skills for parents to practice as well, to introduce the gesture skills associated with the gestures in voiceover. So the idea is the children would go into school and be already equipped with all the voiceover skills. When we introduced French-speaking families, we also wanted to ensure that other populations, including Indigenous population, were supported within this project. And it was supposed to be nationwide, therefore rural and city kids were going to participate equitably. Now, when we got onto the project, one piece that nobody really anticipated, but was definitely on our minds, especially with the work that we do, our family. Families have an enormous set of intersectionality. Each family was going to be different. And the idea of the entire project were for children with low vision. But as we know in early childhood development, milestones aren't reached equitably around children, even children without disabilities. And the project also didn't incorporate concurring disabilities. So we had a number of children, and 60% of children with adverse disabilities, multiple disabilities. CVI was one of the largest brain-based disabilities that children experienced and were living with. And this changed everything, and rightfully so. It was such a blessing that we got to do this project because it really developed an awareness for how adverse visual and disabilities are and how intersectionality really impacted the level of interaction and engagement that was required for a teacher as well as a parent. So within this within this project, it would be parents supporting the children, not a teacher. And we have so much control within a classroom, and we don't have any control in a research project with the families. So our research priorities changed, and that was the biggest curve that everyone had to anticipate for. We had to allow parent and family priorities to overlap with research priorities, which conflicted quite consistently. But that's what inclusive research is, and that's what universal design is, and we really fell into that. And the most important piece regarding that is that there are so many rigid guidelines within research and activities, money, all of those pieces that really form our what expectations our research project needed to go by did not match families. So we had to really reconstruct our project. We had to really prioritize families and family priorities, and we had to ensure that that was being met first. And how we achieved that was to bring the families into the project itself. We had to rebuild the project within the project. And that was a little bit difficult because it took all of our really wonderful, tidy methodologies and activities and materials and kind of turned them upside down. And this allowed us to give a voice and have lived experience really ensued within the project itself, and really brought out that piece that we could not translate and articulate the value of family and the value of family priorities. So the project ended up taking just a little bit longer to have the families have a real voice and be supported. And our team ended up working with the families within our activities to be able to have them be supported and be the trainers of the children so the children could learn. We had a very high success rate with the project itself. And at first, achieving the achieving the gesture was the main priority. And then we quickly learned that actually engagement and the piece where families and attitudes had changed of accessibility, as well as families identifying with both and all types of disabilities and intersectionalities, was a large piece as well. Parents generally thought that they could only be a part of the project if they fit a certain build. This changed that. Families could understand that identifying with one or more disability or one or more type of intersectionality doesn't mean that they can't access accommodations and materials that they might require for their goals, for their children, and for their families. So we had a very high success rate on the app because we brought the families into not their level, but what their priority is. And I think that's the biggest word we could use, where it wasn't families needed to accommodate to our research, but the other way around. It wasn't one of it. I didn't conduct this in a very general term of research. It really changed everything and changed all of our ideas in research, which actually brought families in. And I think the biggest piece that we learned was we had people with lived experience on the team, and we had lots of touch points of actual one-on-one connection, which was time consuming and did challenge our research timeline, but was so important because the parents are the subject matter experts with their children, and they're actually the ones that are going to be working with their children and changing attitudes on accessibility, as well as the lifetime attitude and relationship with accessibility that their children and the families will be working with throughout their child's entire life, education, workplace, whatever their personal goals are. That needed to be recognized in this piece, and we needed to be the learners in that moment without exploiting the parents at all. We also wanted to provide the parents with what they need, and time was very little. So we had to be very creative with our materials to access as much information and collect as much data without overlapping and overwhelming the parents. And from that came a resource zone. We created an entire online resource zone that supported every level of accessibility knowledge, device knowledge, app knowledge, concept knowledge, and time with the parents to have one-on-one training if they needed. But in this resource zone, we had multiple ways of interacting with the parents. We wanted to do more, but didn't have time. Something for a chat. We wanted to introduce a chat. We all wanted to introduce other activities for peer support for parents. But of course, that that wasn't a part of it, so we didn't get ethical approval for that. But what we really learned is at first the project was this inciting piece for all of us to come in and support children. And what we really learned was this was a parent interaction, and families are who we are supporting. And it is the families who are actually serving us. And we wanted to give back to the families by having them at the table to make more decisions, to be able to have autonomy of what's happening in their home. And that provided us the trust and relationship for the families to open up and really talk about the barriers and how to engage children for this app to be successful. And again, I had mentioned we had a very high success rate of engagement with the app, which was wonderful because, again, this is an early childhood. So children as early as 2 to 6 were engaging. And we really found that when children were engaged and learned the concept of gestures to manipulate a digital platform, that supported them with understanding what VoiceOver was in order to manipulate any type of device. And for the children that were entering school, that concept clicked quite quickly. And this is very different than what we know in terms of training and education in a controlled environment in a classroom. I'm sorry, can we have a time check?
Yes, we are at time.
Perfect. I was trying to get everything in my head in that moment. So I apologize if I wasn't clear and concise, but I really wanted to just express how exciting this was to turn research upside down and really have the participants and the families be a part of that. It was really very much a co-design research project that was quite spontaneous and accidental.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Really appreciate it. So up next, I'd like to introduce Dan, Symbia, and I also see that Sierra and Andrew are with us today. Take it away.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you, Corinne. This is really a wonderful pleasure to present to you all about the library. It is a run-up to our Child Right annual conference that we haven't had in a long time. And this Library of Lived Experience, maybe we could introduce ourselves first. I'm Dan Goldowitz, who's been with Child Right, I guess, since the beginning, and nurtured our host, Pierre, and he's doing a fantastic job, as you are, Corinne. And over to you, Symbia.
Hello, everyone. My English name is Symbia Barnaby. My traditional feasted Haida name is Kuka Jung. I'm here as a community researcher, as a parent, as a patient partner, and super excited to be here. We both want to acknowledge that we're on traditional unceded lands. Mine is the Coast Tsimshian territory out in BC, and then Dan's, where the work that it takes place is on the Coast Salish, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. So that's a little bit about us.
Yeah, thanks, Symbia. And as the acknowledgement indicates, we're very much BC centric in what we're doing. And that's because, as you see below here, the Michael Smith Health Research BC, which the BC Spore Support Unit runs under, is our current funder. And so we're putting forth this sort of pilot program with the BC-based and in neurodevelopmental conditions. And so if we go to the next slide, we can see that what the library is about is really to sort of span a key gap. And that key gap was conceptualized in the UK by Miles Sibley, who started a patient experience library that we have been modeling and developing. And that key gap is the double standard in evidence-based practice and how it harms patients. So that's the concept on which we are based, and the audiences that are invited to participate in this virtual gathering place, that is the library, are shown here. Not only individuals with lived experience, but researchers, clinicians, and policymakers, all to try to make a difference and to bridge that gap. So over to you, Symbia.
Yeah. So as Dan was saying, we've created a platform for people with lived experience to upload content speaking about their lived experience. So the intention for this platform is to, one, connect the voices of lived experience, highlighting neurodevelopmental conditions. That's the basis of who we're trying to invite forward. If you have a disability that's neurodevelopmentally based, we're looking to engage with families, people with lived experience, adults, to upload content to this platform to be able to be shared with others. So the other intention is to create that space where stories and historically excluded perspectives can be shared. When we look at content where clinicians, doctors, researchers, when we do scoping reviews, it's usually typically research that's been done by other clinicians, other researchers all across, Canada and worldwide, and not there hasn't been a lot of spaces where it's directly focused on the lived experience, so that clinicians, doctors, nurses, other people within the healthcare field could access to be able to see things from lived experience in their perspective. And then the last reason, the last intention that we're looking at too is advocating. So advocating for needs-based research, practice, and policy changes. So when we look at if we look at where funding comes from, what we're informed by, and then where policy changes happen, if we don't have that lived experience, being able to be a part of that research, oftentimes, services or practices don't always match the need of the people that we're trying to serve. Next slide. So part of being able to bring this library to life, there's a couple things to know. One is the library and its resources are hosted on the Tapestry platform. I don't know, Dan, if you wanted to make a mention a little bit about Tapestry, and then I can go to the next parts.
Yeah, the Tapestry has been created by a wonderful professor at UBC and is a very interactive, engaging platform that we found is very useful to utilize and bring the library to life.
Yeah, so the way that it works is that people are invited in to upload content to it. And I don't want to name drop, but the way I've been trying to present it to people is it's kind of like YouTube, but for, people with disabilities. They get to upload their content to our platform that we've created. So what happens when they do the sorting is we've looked at nodes. These are, a cluster of main ideas that come together that people can upload our subject matter, that they can upload their videos or content, poetry, artwork to. So if we look at these nodes, they're informed by subjects that are a patient advisory or our Library of Lived Experience leadership group came together, and they said, we know that, barriers to accessing support, exclusion, sibling experience, different things like that are really important to us. And we're going to create nodes that people can upload information to. And it helps too when people go into search eventually, when there's things uploaded to it, they'll be able to go, hey, I want to look at, what's the content related to, say, like exclusion. So within each node, you can explore stories, research, and other subject content. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and so one of those nodes that we found out is really a critical component of the lived experience is that of the educational system. And one of the members of our leadership group that Symbia leads was Rebecca Bradley, and she uploaded a story about her child. And just to give you a sense of the content, but also a moving story. The next slide, and Andrew, if you want to hit play on it, that would get us going.
My name is Rebecca Bradley, and I am a proud Métis mom of 3. I've been a member of the Leadership Council for the last year plus, and I'm offering my lived experience to the Tapestry Project. The reality of my son's time at school was very different than what we had hoped for and envisioned. My son was matched with an older DEA worker that was meant to be trained in special, non-violent crisis intervention training. Unfortunately, she used a lot of physical means to manage my son and what she saw as his challenging behaviors. She was not offering autism-affirming care and looked down at my son's constant stimming, his way of managing his dysregulation in a stressful environment. My son was alienated from his peers in the school, and when he was brought into the classroom, all the other students were ushered over to one side, while my son was held by his worker in the corner, far from the other students. It was very sad to witness this lack of inclusion and obvious alienation of my sweet little boy who was so excited to attend this school and meet new friends. As Malcolm is nonverbal, he cannot tell us what was happening each morning when he was at this school, but we had seen enough. After much thought and consideration, we made the difficult decision to withdraw Malcolm for his own safety as we continued to see instances of lack of inclusion, alienation, and use of physical restraint being inflicted on my child. We began the long process of finding support and resources. After 3 years of advocating, we were back at square one. We searched for advocacy and support online, and we accessed resources from the Library of Lived Experiences Tapestry tool, where I was able to read other parents' experiences, gain support, and access valuable peer-shared testimony. I would love to say there was an easy resolve to this situation and closure, but unfortunately, we are still in the process of advocating for my son to have the kind, inclusive care he deserves that will enable him to have a positive learning experience.
So this is the beginning of our library, and there's lots more that we plan on doing, including many more stories, like Rebecca's sort of searing portrait of her child in the educational system and how to deal with it. Through funding from the BC Sport Support Unit, the Library of Lived Experience will create further developments because we're in our early stages. We're still developing. We're going to be seeking lots more stories, hopefully through this virtual meeting and the meeting in Toronto at ChildBright. At the same time, we want to improve library accessibility, and you've heard some really nice talks about that previously, and similarly provide translation services. And we have started a digital storytelling partnership with the Family Support Institute that Symbia will talk more about. We plan on hosting workshops and working groups to focus on individual problems and come up with solutions that we would like to interact with clinicians and researchers and policymakers. And finally, we're very excited about announcing we're going to put out a quarterly newsletter that our team, particularly Andreas and the team, has put together, and we'll have that out at the end of the month. So this is places we're going, and over to you, Symbia.
Yeah. So, like Dan spoke on really quickly there, so I am currently I have a contract with the Family Support Institute, and Dan had reached out to our executive director to see if there was a partnership that was possible. And then we pitched the idea of doing a digital storytelling grant. So where we're able to take staff from our research team and then staff from Family Support Institute and teach them digital storytelling so that they're able to start recording some of these stories. Because when we look at, like I said earlier, historically excluded voices, there's not always voices like ours of lived experience being able to be part of research. So being able to pair our two organizations together, so Family Support Institute is a provincial nonprofit that helps support people with disabilities, any type of disability, all throughout the lifespan. So with the position that I have, I said we have access to our Indigenous Advisory Council. We have one within the Family Support Institute. And what I had proposed is that we're able to do those digital storytelling workshops with our Indigenous Advisory Council to ask who out of that council wants to share part of their stories. And then that way we're able to facilitate recording that story and then being able to upload it on the Library of Lived Experience, but also on the Family Support Institute's website to be able to show and demonstrate that we have a broad understanding of what disability actually means to people with lived experience. And when we look at overall that, we're looking at projects that are going to be able to, in the future, be able to facilitate recording those stories. And it's super important. Yeah. Last slide. So if you are looking to connect with us, our info's there. There's a QR code. We'll also be in person, like Dan mentioned. And then our website is there. So libraryoflivedexperience.ca. If you want to see us in person, Dan, could you make mention? I forgot the title of it, but we'll be there being able to pitch our project and then be able to be there for answers, question and answer period. I think it's day 2, but yeah.
Well, day 1 actually, it's
Day
at
one,
the idea forest, a dynamic knowledge exchange session where we get 1 minute to condense everything we've said right now, and then we meet everybody at the tables to chat. So thanks to all for listening, and thanks to Becky for that concept about of what the library is about.
Thank you so much, Dan and Symbia. Really appreciate it. So for the next presenters, I'd like to welcome back Sam. There's Sarah as well, Connie, and I see we also are joined by Donna and Andrea. Take it away.
I'm just pulling up the slides. Hey, hi everyone. So I'm Sam Machinsky, and I'm joined with my colleagues Donna Thompson, Sarah Pott, Connie Putterman, and Andrea Cross from the Family Engagement FER program. Today we'll be sharing our strategies and barriers to building cultures of partnership. And by that we mean spaces where researchers, clinicians, families, and patients actively work together as equals. We'll share experiences and lessons learned from 3 programs: Sarah from Rare Kids Can, the Pediatric Rare Disease Clinical Trials and Treatment Network, Andrea from the Brighter Path Project at the Department of Pediatrics at McMaster University, and Connie from CAMH. So the FER program launched in 2018 to build capacity and community in meaningful family engagement. Our mission is to train, mentor, and support researchers, clinicians, and families to become champions of this work. Each part of the program is co-led by people with lived experience and researchers. And what began with our landmark FER course has now grown into multiple training programs, a thriving community network, and ongoing engagement support. Off to you, Donna.
Thank you, Sam. So as you can see, the Family Engagement and Research course is making a very significant impact. To date, we have 770 graduates from 24 different countries, and those were from 29 different cohorts of the course. And half of all of the graduates are people with lived and living experience of neurodevelopmental disability. And after the course, learners have reported to us very high levels of satisfaction and significant changes in their knowledge, skills, and confidence to participate and partner in research. Next slide. So while these numbers help us to see the immediate impact of the courses that we've created and we offer, to understand how that impact grows, we need to look more deeply at what is taking root through stories from our community members. We're going to show you 3 different stories that illustrate the lessons we learned in how to build cultures of partnership in organizations and in networks.
So I'm going to take it from here, and I think this is what we did and how we all found through some very heartfelt discussions we had from many of us in representing or being embedded in different organizations, the things that were consistent to having those change strategies occur in organizations and to facilitate true authentic engagement and to really build culture of partnerships across organizations. So these are strategies that we believe and all agreed upon that build those cultures of partnership. So one of the things, and I can speak from my experience, having been the inaugural family engagement lead at a large mental health institution, is that a dedicated family engagement lead is really critical to making sure that it happens in the organization. And it means building trust and having a visible face, of which I am, of a go-to person that is both trusted on amongst the researchers and research community and staff, as well as the people with lived experience and especially families. Over to you, Andrea.
Each of the organizations that we've been involved with too have really invested in training to build capacity in the network. And we found this to be a catalyst to supporting building a culture of meaningful engagement. Rare Kids Can and the Brighter Path Network at McMaster University have both sponsored 2 cohorts of the Family Engagement Research course, training over 60 individuals within their networks. A sponsored cohort means that the organization covers the tuition costs for all of the learners, reducing barriers to participation. In addition to the Family Engagement Research course, all of us talked about the importance of foundational training. So 1-hour webinars or in-person workshops have been really important to building that capacity and also that community building with our networks. So each of us have been providing training within our settings, as well as providing ongoing coaching and mentorship to families and researchers involved.
And building on that, having the informal opportunities for connection and community building beyond those specific projects is essential. In order to work together, we know relationships have to be built. And this I think of in 2 ways, as a kitchen table and as a boardroom table. And so an example of how we're building some of those informal connections at Rare Kids Can is through coffee chats, which offer a virtual space to meet with others who are impacted by pediatric rare disease to just simply connect and learn together.
We also wanted to identify how important leadership buy-in is essential for supporting a culture of meaningful engagement. So both having institutional endorsement as well as leadership ongoing support are necessary components. Meaningful engagement cannot be done at the side of one's desk. It does require infrastructure and resources. So advocating to leaders has been essential for why it's important and what is necessary to help support it along its way. Now, we've identified some of the important change strategies that have supported our program's development, but we also wanted to recognize some of the barriers that we faced and the lessons learned through that. So the first barrier at an organization level we faced is infrastructure barriers. So for example, when onboarding patient and family partners onto research practice projects, guidelines and policies did not exist that aligned with the role of the patient and family partner. So we had to really work closely at an institutional level to develop agreements, policies, risk management procedures. And these have required time and administrative resources at multiple levels.
I think that what Andrea is talking about is so important for the success of a true valued integration of partners. But one of the things that we also identified was the actual research culture of the organization, and there, which comes from all levels, from executive levels to the people working day to day. And I think that culture and attitude towards family engagement and research can differ across organizations, and the place and position of family within the types of research that you are doing in your organization. In traditional areas of childhood disability, the family is absolutely key. But when you get into other areas of of research and healthcare, you see that there's different attitudes towards families and their position. And as well, the culture of the perceived legitimacy of the lived experience perspective and accepting that experience as expertise.
It's a great point, Connie. I think I want to point out then this third barrier that relates to all of this, and that is the relationship building. It's time intensive and resource heavy. We say that the relationship building at the project, program, and organizational level takes time and resources. This isn't often built into program timelines or budgets, but it is essential to developing authentic, non-tokenistic relationships underpinned by trust and mutual respect. I think this is particularly challenging in a virtual environment. We're not running into each other in the hallway or sitting beside each other physically, where we might have that opportunity to connect in a different way. And so in that virtual environment, it is particularly challenging to build that relationship, but it is so necessary. And so we identify it as a barrier, but it's a barrier that we can actually address, but it's going to take time and it's going to take devoted resources. Back to you, Donna.
Thank you. And when we invest in nurturing family engagement in research, we see the seeds and the fertile soil and the network of roots intertwining so that new shoots, different shoots come out of the same root network. So this is, I think, a great analogy for the work that we're doing, especially if you think of at the beginning of our presentation when we talked about the example that Sarah brought to us of a network training many researchers, many parent partners within the same institutional entity. Here we have opportunities arising, people, a critical mass of key individuals who have both the confidence and the competence to partner efficiently, effectively, and they have shared research interests and a shared understanding of how to partner together and why it is so important to do so. So we really want to thank you for listening today. And if you'd like to learn more about our suite of programs, which is growing all the time, please reach out to us via these means. Email us at fer@mcmaster.ca, and we're also all of these places on social media. So follow us and reach out. We'd love to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to acknowledge the presenters that we just heard. Thank you to Kathleen, to Dan, Symbia, Samantha, Sarah, Connie, Donna, and Andrea. Really appreciate you sharing your work with us. I did want to note that there were a couple questions for Kathleen, but she is not here. So I will be emailing her some of those questions, and then I can follow up with attendees. I did notice a question from Donna. This is for Dan and Symbia. So for your team, Donna says, I may have missed this, but are parents given prompt questions, areas of research to guide them in making their digital story, or is this a subject and content totally up to parents and youth?
Green, I did message Donna directly, and then I put it in the chat just now. I saw the question and I was trying to come up with it. I'll be really concise. Those nodes that we addressed in the slides, those are the major topics or major ideas that we've come up with as a group of people with lived experiences as things that we know that aren't always included in research and that we found really valuable. That does not limit what people are able to be able to upload for their content. So the short answer is there is those ideas through the nodes. We did consider to make sure that on the website, when people go to it and they start to be prompted to upload their content, was to make sure that they understand that there's that caution that this is forward facing. right? This is public facing information that's being shared. So if this is private information, if it's they're sharing health information or education information, understanding that and not to shy people away from it, but to have an understanding that that is, in the back of their mind, to make sure that, are they comfortable that this information is made public? Are they okay with that? And also understand there are trauma-informed approaches that we're taking. We know we had a discussion before about youth, if they wanted to be able to. So say if an 8-year-old wanted to share their poem about, their journey with like autism or something like that, we'd be encouraging them to be able, their family to be able to help them upload it. And we've had discussions on what's the level of vulnerability that we're open to and being able to hold space for. And then the other implication that we also thought about was the ministry or Child Protective Services being able to see that and using that, towards or impacting somebody's lived experience. So these are all things that we've thought about, all things that we're considering, and that there is, when people do go to try to upload stuff, there is a filtering kind of process, right? If somebody was going to, try to upload, say, something like pornography, it's going to get caught. It's not going to get uploaded. We're not having, bot content or anything like that. There is a way of that engagement. So I hope that helps a little bit. So we don't want to prescribe what people should be contributing. We want to make sure that families have the opportunity to lean in and lead those conversations.
And maybe one other point, Donna, we're planning on having a much larger consultation group of 15 or 20 individuals with lived experience to have a brainstorming session, a half day, to fill out the notes that seem to be the most important to them. So that's going forward. But if I could, I see Pierre has his hand up, but if I could just say one thing to your group, Donna and Andrea and Sam and Connie, there would be a wonderful overlap with some of the community building things that you have envisioned, the kitchen table kind of thing, that it seemed like it would be wonderful for the library to be engaged in that and to bring in folks to the kitchen table for chats and discussions. So I'd really like to talk about that further with you all.
Thank you so much, Dan and Symbia. Back to you, Pierre.
Sure. Actually, just while we have Dan and Symbia, I had a question for both of you. And yeah, I think it's still a great project. Happy to see it getting traction. And I guess just in a broad overall question, in what ways do you think valuing lived experience as knowledge can change the way that decision makers, policymakers, researchers approach decision making?
Are you okay if I go with this one, Dan? That's a really good question, Pierre. Part of the phases that we're in right now, one is creating the platform altogether, right? And then starting to do that community engagement and looking at other disability-related services in order to engage with them to encourage people to start uploading information. One of the next phases of the library is also engaging with clinicians and asking, how does this need to look? How do you need instruction on how to be able to access it and use it? So exactly what you're talking about, Pierre, we're thinking about that. That's like one of the next parts, like moving forward, is that engagement with clinicians, nurses, people that we want to be able to access it. Currently, it's flipping it completely, the model that exists right now. So part of it is holding those engagement sessions with people that we have as intended users to be able to access it, and what kind of instruction or what kind of modules do they need to be able to access it.
And maybe, Symbia, one extra point. So the power of storytelling, I think, is really important. And that's, I think, the modus operandi for creating change. When at Kids Brain Health Network and we visited the Hill, Parliament every year for a couple of years. It was not the scientific director or the board of directors that the members of Parliament wanted to talk to. It was the individuals with lived experience that garnered all the attention and that made impact. And so I think that's one definite way that the library will have influence going forward, I think.
Yeah, our stories have the ability to mobilize social change, right? Exactly what Dan's just talking about. And I feel like having this novel approach in our country and in our province, I think that is also an attraction. And then how many clinicians currently, like at each research project that we talk to, I ask about that Indigenous engagement. I ask about newcomer engagement. I ask about, all those different, historically excluded voices. What's that engagement level look like? And oftentimes research projects say, we've had limited amount of engagement with that specific, unless they're tailoring it to that exact lived experience, right? So I think that there is an appeal to, and then the last piece, I'll say it really quickly, as an Indigenous person, storytelling is our mode of knowledge translation and knowledge transmission. I know as an Indigenous person, I know about our origin stories, our land, our governance structure, because of storytelling, right? So I understand that storytelling is a powerful vehicle for knowledge translation, transmission, and then for social change. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dan and Cynthia. And so I realize we are running out of time. For Connie, Sam, and for the rest of the FIR group, I do have a question. I'll pop it in the chat, or you can just email on it later. Yeah, I guess we have our final set of presenters in just a second. So let me just pop my question in there. If you feel free to, or you can just get back to me by email, and we can certainly discuss it a bit more. Okay. So, yes, to thank you all for that wonderful set of presentations. Yeah, so we are, I mean, it's been a heavy 3 days of presentations. It's sad to say we are near the end here with our final two set of presenters. So, yes, I want to welcome back Connie and Sekiko, who will be first up in the final set.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for introduction, and I'm very honored to co-present our project with Connie, who has been involved from the beginning till the end. Oops, sorry.
Yes, we're going to switch gears a little bit and focus on an IKT, or Integrated Knowledge Translation for Social Innovation, a very specific project. It was a case study on an incubation innovator project that we did over a number of years with ChildBright and our KTKM co-lead team, who are all mentioned on this slide. I think you'll find this a very interesting and unique project that we want to highlight. So if you go to the next slide, what was our purpose in doing a knowledge translation incubation innovator project? And really, it was to promote and facilitate innovative KT projects in childhood disability research, and to really highlight the importance of innovation. So innovative is the key word. And how do we capture and qualify and quantify, but qualify innovation in KT and childhood disability research? We started as a group in 2017, and we put out a competition through ChildBright for up to $12,000 awarded per year for these KT research projects that could show the innovative and innovative ways they could produce do KT projects and products. We had a review panel of which I was one of a handful of members. And we chose the projects, and it was a multidisciplinary team of knowledge translation experts. So I, as coming from a family perspective, along with a number of a couple of PIs and research, also other researchers on the team. Over the years from 2018 to 2021, we awarded 7 projects. And here's a list of some of the products. I don't know, Sakiko, were you going to talk about any of them, or just to give a snapshot of what they were about?
Yeah, I think, because of the time constraint, I'm not going to the details, but the KM program website has those details.
So as I said, we were doing research on research and really looking at these 7 awarded projects. And what we wanted to do was understand the process and context of how innovation happens through integrated knowledge translation practices amongst a multidisciplinary group of people. And that in and of itself, is interesting, but as well, we're looking at people with very different perspectives, from researchers, trainees, clinicians, parent partners, patient partners, community partners, KT specialists. So all of these were amongst the team members of all these awarded projects. And we looked at the data from both mid and end point of the data. And what is so unique, and I can really go on a lot about this process from a parent perspective, which is the hat I wore, was how the process happened and how the collaboration with patient family partners happened throughout this unique project. So as I talked about, there was a review panel of a committee awarding the grant money for these projects. Then there was a phase where we were, as through the qualitative study, we were, I was part of a team with other family partners and helping to actually train the other family partners on how to actually be involved in a project like this, whether it was how to approach a qualitative study. I also had to be trained, so to speak, and I say that in quotes, from the research team. And that what happened at the qualitative data analysis level. Now, I was open to it and the team was committed, but we learned how together, how to look at the data, at the qualitative data through interviews, which we had been part of, and to be able to analyze the data and look at it from various lenses. We coded the transcripts in dyads. It was a very time-consuming process, and the whole team of us who were part of this project did it together. And then we reviewed together the preliminary findings and had much input on the manuscript and draft. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sakiko to tell you a little bit about that.
Thank you so much, Connie, for showcasing that process. And I'm just going to explain a little bit of how we analyze data. And actually, we use implementation science framework, which we chose a consolidated framework for implementation research. So the framework is to understand different contextual factors at different levels. So outer setting, which looks at more like a wider external context, which can actually shape the implementation of that process. And in this case of this case study, we looked at more like the process of how each awardee research project has developed those KT products. And then, so in addition to outer settings, we also look at the inner settings, more teamwork level. How was those relational connections and communications and culture of each team? and also the individual levels, what kind of roles each team members have played, and what are those characteristics of those each individuals. Also, we looked at the process and also the innovation characteristics itself. So by doing the coding, we identify some of the themes and we mapped onto these different level of contextual factors. So I'm just going to quickly share the results. So what are the drivers for innovation development? So as I mentioned, we identify different factors at different levels. But what stood out is like the researchers recognize no-do gap, but also beyond that, they were also explaining these unmet rights of younger people with disabilities. And some of those researchers were mentioning that it is not justifiable to see the current conditions where young people's rights of disability are not met. And that is going to, be the driver for innovation development. And there are also many facilitators for innovation development, which also we identified at different levels. And what stood out here is also like that culture that values lived experience at all teams, which got this award. And also the transdisciplinary work that fosters collaboration across organizations and disciplines. As we interviewed different partners, we also identified some people who are specialized in certain areas. And also open communication for co-learning was the common contextual factor at the inner settings. And in terms of the outcomes, in addition to the tangible KT output, there are many positive impacts that were reported by the teams, in particularly for the impacts on youth, so some capacity building and friendship between those youth partners, and also empowerment. And also in some cases of the project, they're also reporting some positive impact on the community in terms of the community awareness of those sensory sensitive environment where they are living. And in terms of the sustainment of innovations, common factors, they highlighted that it is important to have accessibility and adaptability for different populations, and also building on the established connections throughout this process. And then those different partners, institutions can actually utilize what was developed throughout this process. So the quick takeaway based on this project, so human-centered and equity-centered approach to lived experience to people with disability is a critical driver for innovations. And also both partners with lived experience and researchers, they have a role in making research partners' tacit knowledge and lived experience visible so that the actual KT output can be made. And many researchers who were interviewed here, they mentioned that the process was full of uncertainty and unpredictable, but being comfortable with this uncertainty and adjusting to it as a part of the process was necessary. And also for funders, this flexibility for funding and time frame can facilitate the innovation process. And as I mentioned, the KT innovations can bring multiple level intangible outcomes for partners. They can gain confidence and trust in partners, and also feeling hard, acknowledgement of the other. And Connie can, finalize our key takeaways.
And I'll just like sum up that it's so interesting that some of the key takeaways from the actual science and the project that Sakiko just mentioned also are really reflected in our process of actually doing this kind of qualitative study, where the culture there and values valuing the lived experience voice in the project itself was so embedded in the project. So there was a commitment of the whole team to help develop our skills as parent partners, patient partners, to support our lived experience voice. And I can't emphasize enough, and this kind of answers the question that you asked in the last session about valuing lived experience. I can't emphasize enough the validation that comes from that kind of commitment to the lived experience voice and the validation of my expertise as equally important to the scientists' expertise as we're together analyzing qualitative data gives so much credence to the project itself. I think it's really unique, and it raises the standard and bar of integrated approach to partnership with lived experience in research, as that validation is absolutely key to feeling completely partnered. And the exercise of doing it together was really fun and rewarding. And I can say that they really set a high bar. So when I approach other projects, that I want that same level of acknowledgement, commitment, resources, patience, and time that this team put in to me being part of the team. So that's a really huge takeaway of this unique project.
And thank you so much, Connie, for concluding our presentation. And if you're interested in learning more, here are some resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sakiko and Connie. Hope to get back to you in the Q&A portion in a bit. All right, rounding up our sort of presenters today are Sharon and Lisa. So happy to hand over the virtual podium to you all. So feel free to start sharing your screen, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much. I'll wait for Sharon to get her screen open as well. And I'm just going to share.
Thanks, Lisa. Just give me a second. I'm coming on.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Sharon, do you want me to share my screen?
That'd be great, please. Yes. Thank you.
Sorry. All right. Hi, everybody. We're talking today about lived experience being data in integrating lived expertise of clinicians and families to inform implementation science.
It's good to see everyone. Thanks for having us here. So I'll start with some introductions. So I'm Sharon, an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University. And I have been with the Child Bright Phase 2 team since my postdoctoral training. Have since transitioned into this early career position, but have been very happy to stay involved with the team and lead this important work. And I'll let Lisa introduce herself.
And I am a family partner that works on the research team, the Seiden research team here at BC Children's Research Institute. And I've been involved in this particular project from the start. Thanks for having us.
So we'll start by acknowledging that Lisa and I are here at the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, where our research team is based out of BC Children's Hospital Research Institute. And we're excited to share with you some of the work where we're talking about integrating lived expertise into our research process. And we have no conflicts of interest to disclose here. So to get us started, what we want to share with you is a brief summary of what this work entails when we say with a Phase 2 project. In Phase 1, our team, which was it's led by Dr. Hal Seiden, at the time, he and his colleague, Dr. Tim Oberlander, developed this clinical tool that we refer to as the pain pathway. And it was developed to assess and manage pain and irritability for children with severe neurological impairments. That clinical tool was tested at the tertiary level in pediatric hospital across Canada through a randomized control trial where they looked at whether or not it works and is it effective for managing pain and irritability for this population of children. And as that is getting tested or to understand how it works, this part of the project for us has been looking at Now that we know it does work and it helps these children and families, how can we take the tool and bring it into the community? So can general pediatricians that see these families in a community context also use this tool? How do we implement it? And what are going to be the factors or strategies that can help make it useful for the pediatricians in their day-to-day practice? And so one thing I'll just add to that is, and Lisa will speak to it more, is that we prioritize a patient-oriented and multi-method approach, and we're going to speak to how we've gone about that in this work.
Yeah, so patient-oriented research is not new to the audience here. This is what all of us are is important to all of us and what we're embedding in what we do. And so we've took this lens from the very beginning of our project of engaging with patients, and in this particular population, specifically parents and caregivers, just to make sure that what we're creating, the outcome of what this research will be, is actually serving them and their needs. But Sharon will also speak to the lived expertise that is also important, that comes from clinicians and research members from the phase 1 of the study, and how their experience and expertise has also been an important part of the phase 2 as well. So lived expertise of family partners. Our research team has 2 family partners that are paid staff members. So all of the research projects that are ongoing throughout the lab have this embedded nature of engaging with these parents, myself being one of them, and ensuring that just every day-to-day research activity is coming through the lens of the patient, parent, and caregivers that are the research is intended to serve. And that the intention there is to center families, value them, and empower them to be part of the decision-making and processes of the research that's being undertaken.
So in building this project and thinking about how we can roll out the implementation, as Lisa pointed out, we wanted to be thoughtful about who brings that expertise. As a priority for us, that was the families, that were the parents and caregivers who bring experience caring for children with health complexity. And we also wanted to draw on the experience of those who were in the previous phase of the research. So as part of our kind of preliminary work, we reached out to the research team in phase 1, those who were clinicians and researchers rolling out the pain pathway through the RCT. And we asked them, what were the successes in your experience supporting this project? Where were the roadblocks? And what we were hearing were insights that informed kind of this part of our plan. So some things I wanted to highlight here. We heard that the pathway was really easy to follow, that the families that were seen using this tool really appreciated being partners and being involved in this kind of journey with the clinicians and being assessed for pain and irritability. And we also heard that there could be some anticipated challenges moving this kind of tool from the hospital into the community, that resources look different, that time capacity of the pediatricians would look different. And so those are some things that really helped us think about, okay, well, then how are we going to build our implementation strategies that could be kind of addressing the unique needs of the pediatrician. So essentially, this was a process where we drew on the lived experience of the phase 1 team.
Next, we also wanted to engage with parents who were part of phase 1 themselves. So they had children that qualified for that clinical study, or were eligible for it, and they moved through the whole pathway already themselves with their children. So these are families with direct lived experience of this particular diagnosis and have already gone through the pain pathway that we want to roll out in community settings. So we have a group of 5 parents that are represented across our province, actually even outside of BC, and they have various expertise and experiences that they bring to our parent monitoring board. And this parent monitoring board meets quarterly, so we have regular meetings together that usually go over time, and we have lots to talk about, and we take lots of notes of everybody's feedback. And they've been involved from the very beginning of the study, and we're able to give feedback and suggestions and questions about the protocol from the start. And then have even today, we're 2 years in, but today we're now talking about training pediatricians on this pain pathway and rolling that out out in the community. And the Parent Monitoring Board has been an integral part of adding their voice of what they hope to see pediatricians learning and how to care for their children and how to care for them as a family as a whole. And so they've been, a really important aspect in what this looks like in the community and what this will look like in training pediatricians over time.
And in addition to the work we've had with all these people that brought lived expertise, we also wanted to draw on the clinicians who work directly in the community. So we also put together a team of clinician advisors. So this involved the pediatricians who brought expertise collectively with complex care and community practice, two of which are retired and are no longer practicing, but had extensive experience working in the community, and one who is an actively practicing community pediatrician. And so together, the three of them have guided our implementation planning. Our team was invited to engage in a site visit with a current clinic to understand kind of the routine clinic flow and what that would look like if we were to bring in the tool for the pediatricians, which we thought really informed the feasibility of our plan. And they supported kind of the kind of entirety of the research process and developing the study protocol, in providing their input on our preliminary findings. And as we're putting this plan together, as Lisa pointed out, to offer to the community pediatricians, we have also been working on building a CME credits or professional development credits for pediatricians who would gain the education and training here. And so as part of that, the clinician advisors are sitting on our scientific committee for the accreditation. It's been a really, really great experience working alongside these clinicians and the families and the Parent Monitoring Board to kind of get this like very cohesive input on our implementation process.
So what did we learn in this process of integrating many different experiences, many different lived expertise to inform how we go about this implementation study? First is we learned that we need to embrace slow science. And that feels really challenging to accept when science already feels like it goes very, very slowly and it takes a long time for research to get over here to in the clinic and where it's actually helping patients and families. But it's really important to be intentional in taking the time to build relationships and move through the processes with intention, with purpose. And so that does take time. And then the second thing we've learned here is to seek feedback early and often. There's been lots of feedback from the phase 1 study team that was part of the earlier stage of this, and that's informed how we go about phase 2. And so it's important to ask for that feedback and to go back and keep questioning, and if two people with expertise are contradicting each other, ask more questions and reflections and have discussion about what's the best course to move forward and what's the best way to implement all of those ideas.
And as part of this project, what's been important for us is to keep principles of equity, inclusion, and diversity kind of core to our work. And what that means working in particular with children with health complexity and their families. And something that our team has reflected on is that, and kind of a good reminder for us, is that there aren't checkboxes for conducting equity-informed work. It's a process, it's ongoing, and there's always opportunities for step 1 and 2 to take the time to refine those relationships, to continue to seek feedback along the way, and continue to kind of be open-minded to the idea that there are things that, we don't know what we don't know. There are going to be equity considerations that we haven't thought about, and we can continue to refine, or if we feel like there are barriers that's come up or like shortcomings, there's opportunities to kind of address that along the way. And lastly, one of the other central reflections we've had is how do we continue to make our research accessible? We're quite thoughtful about that in with our research team and with the people that we work with. So what are ways we can reduce barriers for engagement? What does engagement look like? Does it have to mean that everyone is online and with your cameras open, or what are other ways that people can offer input. Our team was quite thoughtful about trying to make our ways of engaging as a team more inclusive, and that meant offering different ways of communication. That meant receiving emails with input, or doing a phone call instead, whatever we could to kind of offer that for our team, and to seek feedback about that. So that's been something that for us as a team, these are kind of the central themes and reflections we've had kind of 2 years into our implementation process. And as we embark on the implementation, these are things we want to continue to be mindful of going about the project. And that kind of concludes our time together. One thing I do want to highlight for everyone is Lisa and I have spoken about this process for us. We're happy to. We've been sharing this work in our journey through many other platforms. So we did do a Present at Child Bright webinar on this very topic at a more extensive length. And so if you're interested in hearing more, we also highlight kind of our best practices. You can find that on the Child Bright website. And then we also had the opportunity to participate in a podcast where we spoke more specifically to working with families and capturing parent and caregiver perspectives in implementation research. So wanting to highlight those for you if you want to hear more, and thanks for listening to us.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you both, Lisa and Shannon. Perfect. Right. So yeah, I'll set a few minutes aside for some Q&A, and thank you, Ibrahim. We have one in the chat for Sakiko and Connie. And so Ibrahim mentions that the message that innovation should be human-centered is so important. In line with that, how should researchers talk with families about new innovations, like a high risk, high reward, such as AI, that are not yet fully explored and involve uncertainty?
That's a really hard question. I think, Ibrahim, I don't know. I think very frankly about how it is uncertain, and I think taking that approach that and that is the approach that we often take in building a partnership with each other, is that you don't always know what is to be expected, or there's a lot of uncertainty in going into these kinds of projects. I think it's being really frank and honest about it, and that uncertainty also is coming from the research side too. And it's okay. You don't have to, as a researcher, know everything ahead of time or portray that. I think it levels the playing field of the power imbalances by admitting that this is really innovative and new things that is somewhat unexplored. I don't know, Sakiko, if you have any other thoughts given the outcomes from the project itself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Connie, for sharing your thoughts. And I also found it's a very challenging, very difficult questions. And then, in terms of our case study, we didn't have any project that was using AI because that was funded, a while ago. But I think, as Connie was mentioning, like being open, and then like the communication, and particularly like something uncertainty. And I think that those conversations can actually provide opportunity to look at more like a critical perspective and ethics. For example, something related to AI, in terms of those biases or other inclusion, exclusion of those peoples. I think that open up the space, and then having those people like a partner with lived experience, they can provide a lot of things to be considered, not to harm others just by trying to create like innovation. That's kind of my thought.
So I guess while we have Siko and Connie at the helm, a question I had for you is in the presentation you outlined the number of KT Innovation Incubator projects that was funded by the initiative, and so I guess the question I had was how does innovation or the idea of innovation emerge differently across those various integrated KT projects? And looking at them as a whole, what would you say drove successful outcomes for those projects?
Sakiko, you go ahead first.
Yeah, I think one thing what was recurring was those researchers, those commitment to learn from a partner with lived experience. And many projects actually had challenges because they had like a COVID pandemic. So their plan actually had to be changed during the pandemic. And they were reporting those challenging and engaging with people, but also like it was hard but they take it an opportunity to learn new things and try new things. What are the ways to engage with those partners with lived experience in a different way? And that was also, they found that's something innovative. They didn't plan, but so I found always like try something new and learn from that experience I found, I guess, like from those case studies. And Connie?
Yeah, and we had, Sakiko and I and the team had a few discussions about this. And I think what Sakiko was talking about was, one, the commitment, and also the willing to, as Ibrahim kind of intimated a bit, just on the person-centered, a human-centeredness of the projects that were very consistent amongst them, and the willingness to pivot, the willingness to be a bit uncertain and to live with uncertainty and be okay with that. And that was modeled almost in every one of those projects. That came out, the ability to morph a little bit as like Sakiko said, during the pandemic or in different situations, and accepting the commitment to each other as a team. And it took, and the funds really help, by the way. Like those funds, having the funds to actually explore this topic in and of itself, it is a real advantage. So having the funds to be able to do that. So those were all the factors.
Well, no, thank you, Connie and Siko. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Like with the training program, we had a funding stream, and we had a few of the projects presenting over the last few days to create training materials and like creative training materials, and that's sort of with our similar experience too. Is that they typically had to pivot, typically had to be adaptable, and yeah, just kind of go with the flow and make it work. So yeah, no, I think that certainly is a common cross-cutting theme. Was missing of any other hands up or any comments I've missed in the chat? If not, I'm happy to pose a question to you, Lisa and Sharon, as we wrap up today. Let's grab my notes again. And so yeah, I appreciate your presentation. I really like at the end where you highlight a number of key lessons learned for your team as you were doing this multi-phase project. And so I guess a more broader question I have is like, of the lessons learned with the pain pathways study, what elements do you think could generally help bring patient-oriented practices or principles into everyday care?
Lisa, do you have any thoughts? You want to start first, or?
You start first. I'm going to think a second.
I think it's a great question, and Pierre, and my two thoughts I have. One is, like, I think speaking for Lisa and I, coming up with those lessons learned. I think they're quite relevant. Yes, you're right. Not just to research, but yeah, how do we bring that into practice? One thing we've heard from clinicians, because we also did a barriers and facilitators study where we interviewed general pediatricians. One thing we heard from them, which they heard from the families they worked with, is that the partnership and the collaboration is truly key. And likewise, we heard that too from our phase 1 study. So I think there's this like convergence of a sentiment around working together, and working together. What does that look like? Well, that's where those lessons learned, I think, are really helpful. But what we've heard from families that they've appreciated is working with healthcare teams and providers that are willing to kind of be collaborators with them and be on the journey with them. And in fact, that's really one of our takeaways from the first part of our work in phase 1 is doing this together really helped them feel supported and heard. And that was kind of irrespective of what the outcomes were from being on the pathway, but that process was meaningful to them. So that's one thought I had, and I think that would be I can see that as being an important takeaway and something to keep in mind in clinical care, because we kind of heard that both from the families and the clinicians. So
yeah, I would carry off of that. We understand the importance of lived experience and patient-oriented research in this research space, especially under an organization like ChildBright and stuff like that. So we're very much in this space, but it's not necessarily everywhere in the research world, and it certainly isn't everywhere in the clinic spaces. With that said, shadowing what Sharon said, we talked about the Barriers and Facilitators project and interviewing pediatricians, which I was also a part of. It was actually really encouraging and hopeful to me to hear from pediatricians about how much they want to do for their patients and how much they do want to partner with their patients and families. And unfortunately, a lot of the challenges that they run up against is the resources and the time to do so. And so how does research help push policy and push those avenues in making those clinical spaces more just a better space for families to be able to partner with their physicians better. It's a really challenging thing to do when you don't have a long enough appointment time, or when you don't have the resources to really to do that. One piece of this study is this nursing aspect of having a nurse support the physician in taking care of the family and walking through the pathway with the family. And the nurse does regular check-ins. Most pediatrician offices don't have a nurse that can do this. And so we did that as a research team for phase 1. And now the question is, how do we implement this nurse in phase 2 when it's not something that's actually available in clinics? We've heard from families repeatedly that this is a really important aspect of this pathway. And so that's a policy thing that then needs to be advocated for at a policy level of why paying for nurses in more complex care spaces in the hospitals or in pediatrician offices to help support that relationship building is just so important.
Yes, I think that really greatly illustrates that gap between research and clinical and implementing in clinical care. So yeah, that need to identify those barriers, identify those gaps that are impeding it, super critical, and certainly I don't think insurmountable as long as you have enough resources to throw at it, which is the other barrier that we deal with. So thank you so much for that wonderful. I know I was on the spot for that wonderfully detailed response. And with that said, I want to thank you all for sticking out and until the end, and for our wonderful slate of presenters today. Hopefully we'll see you all in Toronto next week, and we get to continue some of these discussions at the Idea Forest. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thanks,
Thank
Pierre.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.